Hello, my name is Abby, and I will be presenting on the Netherlands and how sea rise is impacting their area. To begin, I want to talk about the geography of the Netherlands. So, around a third of the area is below sea level. As you can see on the map, dark blue is below sea level, and then the light blue is between 0 and 7 meters above sea level, and then the Greenland, which is more the inland area, is above 7 meters of sea level. And then the lowest point sits at 22 feet below sea level. Um, the area is very flat land, which makes it very flood prone. And because of sea level rise and um, its low elevation relative to sea level, it gives it high vulnerability for flooding. And then there's a lot of dense population that lives in these coastal areas that are prone to the flooding, which can cause negative impacts to the area and the people living there. So, why is sea level a threat? Well, climate change is causing sea level to rise. As we know, this is caused by melting ice and thermal expansion, which is basically saying the water is heating up and it's taking up more space. There's a rising risk of coastal flooding, storm surges, and salt water going into the agriculture due to this sea level rise. And the Netherlands is especially vulnerable due to this low elevation that I was talking about. In this graph on the side, it shows predicted flood vulnerability for 2100, which, as you can see, the majority of the Netherlands is going to be impacted, especially if you see in the middle where it says Amsterdam, where a lot of their population live, is in the extreme area, as well as the people close to the coast. And they're expecting about 97% of the population to be affected in that time frame. So the Netherlands has a history of flooding. They have a history of frequent floods. Um, Especially one notable example was in 1953, which is known as the North Sea flood, which killed over 1,800 people, and there was massive damage to not only homes but also flood our farmland. And this led to major changes in the flood management policies, as you're going to see in the next slide. So immediately following this 1953 flood, they started to build dams, storm surges, and dikes. You can see in the photo the top two are going to be the storm surge barriers. Um, you can see there's an older photo as well as a newer photo that I included. And then on the very bottom, the grassy photo is going to show the dike, which is basically a way of preventing water that's starting to come on shore, giving it a place to kind of absorb into before it starts to hit land. Um, but yeah, and this was kind of known as a very large engineering project around the world because of the high vulnerability that these people are going through due to the massive flooding that had just happened. And then more modern policies, there's been a shift in the idea between fighting the water and flooding versus living with the water. Um, and so they're giving more rooms for rivers to they're expanding floodplains of these rivers to basically allow them to flood a little bit, as well as strengthening their already known infrastructure like dikes and barriers, as well as just having water management planning better and focusing on long-term climate resilience and just reducing their impact overall. I like the tree photo I added because it really shows them living with the water and allowing their trees to grow in the water and not get damaged by any floods that may happen. You can also see in the right-hand side the impacts that they have had based on the flooding over the last 300 or the last few hundred years. They've also protected the coast in many ways, like adding more sand to the beaches to prevent flooding from happening as often as well. They are protecting their main port, and they're doing this mainly by adding a special surge barrier that will actually open and close to allow boats to come in because as you know, a port is very important for an area to get their trading done. And they're also just monitoring and upgrading that infrastructure as much as possible. They also have very innovative solutions such as adding floating homes to the area, and water plazas, which are basically just a deep area within like a infrastructure built or urban area that is meant to flood so the that the infrastructure around doesn't get flooded, but rather there's like a lower area that will collect the water first. Um, they're really pro flood resilient urban design now, and a lot of more drainage and pumping systems. And lastly, they're working to um, innovate their agriculture to fight against the flooding. They plant more salt tolerant crops as they can, as well as starting to add floating wet agriculture, which is just utilizing the water space that they have around them. They are improving their water storage and irrigation, and they're planning long term and planning for the possibility of having to relocate in the future. And like I said before, they are investing in climate adaptation and making sure that they aren't having a big impact on global climate change overall, because that causes more sea level rise, which is not good for this area. Um, Netherlands is a great example of an area that is really working with the environment rather than against it and innovating to help themselves, but not, like I said, not fighting against the environment, but working with what they have. Thank you.